Hello everyone, Linda Israel here, and I haven't decided how or where I'm going to post this video, so it may only be a Patreon and it may become a public video. So basically, if you're seeing this video, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, check out my Patreon, check out my links below to all my social media. Today I'm just going to do some mixed media play. The idea is what I call a masterboard, where you have a piece that you create and then you can cut it up and use it in other projects. So it kind of gives you that cohesiveness because you've got the same artwork that you can use on multiple things in, say, like a journal. And in fact, I'm hoping that if this is good enough, that maybe it'll be something that I can scan in and turn into digital art. So what I've got here is two pieces of 8.5 by 11 linen paper cardstock. It's rather heavy. It's not quite watercolor weight, but I'm hoping that it'll be enough. And then I have some supplies here. So basically, I'm just going to get started. I've got some Bible pages, dictionary pages, and hymnal pages. So looking at copyright and understanding that anything, this being 2018, made or printed before 1922 is free domain. And then started learning a little bit more about Bibles and dictionaries, where those are words that have been created a long time ago, and what's copywritten is the reproduction of that book. And I'm not going to reproduce the book, I'm going to use it in art and put things over it. So you won't be able to see the whole thing. So I just grabbed a few that I thought might be kind of neat, and we're just going to start tearing them and adding little pieces here and there onto this masterboard. So I'm just going to tear up a few pieces, not really worried about what it looks like, but I want to make sure that I have a good variety. These are different types of fonts, look a little different here and there, and I probably won't need that many. Alright, I think I've got a few pieces here, and the first thing I'm going to do, because I want this to be in the background, is I'll glue these down. I've basically got my little glue pot. I have a tutorial. Basically, I chuck some sponges, I put it in a container, I add a little bit of water, and I add a little bit of white glue, Aleene's tacky glue. You can use a sponge, you can dip your papers in there. I'm going to use a paintbrush that I always clean out when I'm done. And I'm also not going to worry about the seam here. When I take the washi tape off the back, I'll end up cutting this. So I'm just going to lay these pieces down using the white glue. And we're just going to do them randomly. And basically, I'm going to go in here and just keep doing all of this and working. I'm going to turn on some music and kind of just play. And then when I want to talk to you, I'll stop the music and we'll talk for a moment. Okay, so when I'm done with my glue pot, I'll stick my paintbrush into some water, and that'll help loosen up that glue. And then it's also handy there. And then I try to fill up my glue with a little bit more before I put it away. And then that way it's ready for the next time, because it takes a lot of glue when you're doing this. And I don't know, I just find this more convenient than just pouring a bunch of glue into a bowl and then it gets hard. This way I can close this up and it stays moist, so I'm ready to use it the next time. So I've gone in here and just added a few pieces on here, and I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some stamping over it. I've got a couple of stamps. I'm using stamps that I know that the company that made them allowed for me to stamp, and if I wanted to scan my image in and alter it digitally, I could do that. They only require that you do not take this stamp and duplicate making this stamp to sell. So I know that I'm good on copyright there. So let's get some ink and let's play just a little bit on here. So I've got some graphite black pigment ink, and I'm going to just kind of stamp randomly here and there all over this, so I can just add a little bit more texture to it. And I'll probably do some more stamping later after some layers have been added, but I just want to do some right now. So I've got this iron gate, and this is from Beeline Designs, and this is something you're interested in. I'll have this in my shop where you can buy your own. So I'm just going to sit here and play and stamp all over. And again, if there's a stamp that you see that you want to know more about, just message me below and I'll tell you if that's a stamp we can still get. So I'm going to use a heat tool and make sure that this ink is set so that it won't bleed or move on me on the next layers that I put on here. I think that's one thing that a lot of people, when they're doing mixed media, don't understand, that you need to make sure that your layers are set and dry before you move on, because you'll be disappointed if it turns into mud. So I've got a little palette here, and I've got some gesso, and I'm just going to fill my palette with a little bit of gesso here. And that's probably way more than I need, but I want to have plenty and not have to keep going back and getting more. And I have some stencils that I want to use that I think would be kind of fun. So let me look at, okay. So this is called Punchanella. I've explained this in other videos, but not very often. Whenever sequins are made, they use this strip of this mylar stuff, and some companies will sell their sequin waste or Punchanella. So I'm just going to use some of this. I'm going to get another paintbrush. Sometimes I can scrape it. I'm going to see if that works today. Sometimes you can't. It just doesn't look right. Oh, that'll work. So I'm just going to kind of add a little bit of texture here and there. It'll obscure what's underneath as well, which is fine with me. And I like using gesso because when I go to put other layers over the top of it, the paint and sprays kind of reacts differently with the gesso than it did with just plain paper. And then I have a bucket or a Tupperware type thing that has water and a little bit of Thieves from Young Living, and so I'll put this in here, and then that way when I go to the sink to wash these out, they'll be easier to clean up. And again, you want to dry your layers, because there's nothing more frustrating than to put a stencil down and mess up your first layer of stenciling. I've got a different stencil. This one is a old Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous one, and I just like the diamonds. I want to use some of that on here now. I'm just going to dry this and stop the camera for a few minutes so that I can get it really dry and then think about what I want to do next. It is thoroughly dried, and I decided that I wanted to scan this into my computer as it was right now, so that if I want to use that in another project later on, I have a base that I can start with. So I've done that. And I think now what I want to do is start adding some color to this. So, I'm going to set this aside for a moment. I've got a couple of colors of Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist, and then I have a couple of stencils that I made. So what I'm going to do is I don't want the overspray to, number one, get all over my desk, and then number two, I don't want it to get on the other areas where I am working or not working, and I'm dropping stuff on the floor. So I'm just going to grab a couple of sheets of paper, and I thought what I would do is just kind of spray in a couple of spots, and it, you know, it's not the whole area, it's just a little bit. And I've got, let me find what color I want to use. I've got a couple of colors of Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist. I'm shaking them up. One of them is called Blarney and one is Hemlock Green, so they're a little bit darker. I plan to put flowers on this, so I'm thinking that if I spray a little bit of this here and there, it'll give a nice background for the flowers without it being really leaves, if you will. And I'll mop up off top of the stencil. So that just kind of gives a little bit in that area. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to move this stencil around and do it in a couple other places, not really trying to do one particular pattern, but I just want a little bit here and there. I think now what I'm going to do is just kind of spray through the stencil and let it kind of bleed in a couple of areas. I know there's Tattered Angels on the stencil, so I'm going to put it on upside down. Again, a piece of paper here and just mush, just to kind of give a little bit more decorative detail. So some areas have more color than others, and I think what I want to do next is I've got just some, this is just a Tattered Angels has a little bit of water, and I think I want these to run just a little bit. So Tattered Angels is not permanent until you seal it, so that's why I'm going to spray over it and see how this looks. So it just kind of gives it a neat texture when it runs just a little bit. Alright, well I'm going to dry this and then I'll be back. So it's looking really good. I kind of give you a close-up of it. So it's got a green hue to it. Now I've got a couple of colors of acrylic paint. I've got a blue and kind of a turquoise color. And I have just a little food tray. So I'm going to put a little bit of paint on here. And I think what I'm going to do is just kind of scrape it randomly here and there on this piece. Because again, this is going to be a background and I plan to put stuff on top of this. So I'm just going to kind of pick up some color every once in a while and scrape it on. And I like when you scrape it with a card like this, that since I've got some texture, that texture comes through. And I'll dry this and then move on to the next step. Alright, so I've left this dry for a while. And in between I've also had a live stream on YouTube. So I've played a little bit with some other stuff. And after letting this rest for a little while, I want to add back in some more white. So I've just got some cheap craft paint. And I'm going to put it on my little palette here. Not a lot, just a little bit. And I've got a little gift card, room key card. And basically I'm just going to put a little bit of paint on my card. And then I'm just going to swipe in a few places. And that'll just help tone down some of the brightness that's in this background that I've created. But hopefully it won't, you know, take it too far just by putting a little bit of white over the top. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to dry this and then we'll move on. I don't know if you can tell, where I put the white over the top, it's not bright white, which is what I wanted. I didn't want bright white. And the reason being is because of using Tattered Angels below these layers, and it wasn't sealed. So when you put another layer on top of it, it'll kind of make that Tattered Angels bleed through it, and that's what's happened here. Alright, the next thing I want to do is I want to paint some flowers on here. So I'm going to paint some poppies. So I'm going to get my palette out here. And I'm going to add a little bit of paint on here in my palette. I've got about, I don't know, 2 or 3 different colors. Just so I have a variety. Forgot to shake that one. There we go. And then this one is a true red. So I've got about 3 different versions of red. I dropped some on my page, so I guess I get to paint that area first. So I'm just going to kind of pick up some of these on my paintbrush. I've just got a great big brush, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make a loose shape of what I would say is a poppy. So it looks like a red blob, but we're not done yet. So I'm going to make a few of these red blobs. And I'm just going to go back in and add a little bit of what's left of this red paint, so it's a little bit darker in the center of the flowers. Okay, I'm going to let this dry and I'll be right back. Well, the red is pretty much dry. It's dry enough, I think, for my next steps, which is to get my tray back out again. And this time I'm going to add a little bit of black and a small amount of yellow. And then I'm going to add 2 shades of green. One of them is called Shamrock and the other one is called Powder Green. So I'm just going to add a little bit here. So next what I want to do is I want to add black centers to the flowers. So I've got, wrong brush. I've kind of got a flat round brush. It's usually used for stippling or dry brushing. And so I'm just going to kind of pat the paintbrush down into the black paint and I'm pouncing it onto my red flower. Okay, so I just kind of added the black centers. I'm going to put my paintbrush in the water so it can be cleaning. Now I'm going to take a different brush and I'm going to pick up a little bit of the 2 greens I've put on here. I'm kind of swirling them together and I'm just going to make, in a sense, kind of a leaf shape. I'm just pouncing it. When I come back with some more paint later, I'll help define the leaf shape just a little bit. It's still going to be what I consider kind of abstract. And they're just loosely painted in green leaves. Okay? So I'm going to dry all of this so that I can put the yellow on top of the black. Well, this is pretty dry now. You can kind of see the flowers in there. You can still see the background. Just all those yummy layers that are in there. Alright, so now I've got some yellow and I've picked up another little brush and I'm just kind of pouncing it straight up and down, and I'm just going to pounce it a couple of times in the centers of these flowers where the black is. Just a little bit of yellow. Are those starting to look like poppies? That's what I want them to be, is poppies. Alright, we're going to set my paint tray aside. Alright, so now what I have is I've got a bottle of black paint. In fact, this isn't the original brand because I had another bottle and I dumped some into this one so it'd be full. But I have the No Clog writing cap. It's the large from Scrap Perfect, and it has this nib or spout on here that doesn't require a lot of effort, and it becomes a pen. So I'm going to shake the paint down, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to squeeze out paint. Alright, I always need to test this. I always forget to test it on a scrap of paper, and if it's not coming out, then I've got it put together wrong. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the nib off, make sure that this nib is in there nice and tight. This back on there. I changed bottles, so maybe that's my problem. I'm going to go and wash this out, and that way I'll know that it's all nice and clean, and I'll come back. Alright, I'm going to zoom in here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So the Scrap Perfect comes in, basically there's 5 pieces. There's an extra nib, and then there's these 3 other pieces that have to go together. And when I put away the paint the last time, I failed to put this inside the nib, and so it was clogged down in here because I didn't clean it out before I started today. So this is how it goes together. The nib goes onto the white portion, this blue piece goes on top, and what that does is that helps secure the nib to stay in place. And then we'll put that on our bottle, and I'm going to shake it down, and I should be able, see, now it works perfectly. I just failed to put the nib in, the needle into the nib before I used it last time, or after I used it last time. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and just kind of make squiggle lines to represent the flowers, and then that kind of represents my leaf, like so. You can do this with a marker. Maybe you have a favorite marker you like to use. See how that's coming together? Alright, and then when you're done with it, you make sure that you get that nib down inside. And I don't have my right glasses on so I can see. So it should be lined up in there, and then close it. And that will keep it from drying up in there and clogging. Alright, it's still wet. Let me zoom back out so you can see. I'll kind of pick it up. What do you think? Does that look like a really cool mixed media masterboard? So from here, here's what I would do. If I wanted to keep a copy of this so I could use it again later on, I would take this to my computer and scan it in. And then once I am happy with my copy that I've saved, I would cut it up. I could make it into tags, I could make it into journal pages, pockets, whatever. But that's just the basis of a masterboard. So now that I've got this part done, I could make greeting cards, I could make journal cards or tags. I could add a sentiment or saying with a rubber stamp, or print it on a computer, or handwritten on top of it. So there's really no limit to what you can do with that. So I thought, you know, sharing this with you would give you some ideas of art that you can make yourself. You know, I didn't draw those perfectly. They're kind of abstract, and I kind of like the way they look. I hope you do too. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and like I said at the beginning, I wasn't sure if this will be a Patreon only or if I'll end up sharing it on YouTube later. So either way, make sure that you like my video, give it a thumbs up, leave comments even on Patreon or on YouTube what you thought about this. What kind of flower would you have put on here instead of the poppy? Maybe you have another flower you want me to try on the next time I do a masterboard like this. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my YouTube channel as well, because even though you're a patron on Patreon, if you'll subscribe, you'll also get a notification there whenever I post something. Alright, thanks so much for watching everybody. I'll get some photos and you can see those at the end. Thanks for watching. Have a fabulous day. Bye.